Out of all the different variables that can come into enlarging the size of your D, all the methods, the protocols, the considerations, there is literally one rule, in my opinion, that stands above them all. And if you don't apply this in some way, I really think that your results may not be as good as you want them to be, or you may not even get any results. So by hopefully applying this specific rule, you're able to get more results faster and safer. And that is simply progressive overload. Now, for those of you that already know, that's simply time multiplied by the force, giving you volume, slowly increasing that over time. I mean, that's a pretty simple equation, right? But for those of you that know that, there are 5 things that I want to go over in this video that are going to enable you to effectively implement this more consistently to, again, get more results faster and safer. Now, the first point I want to make is simply just the why. Why is progressive overload important at all? Why do I need to implement it? And why, if I don't, I may not even see results at all? The following 4 points, I'll get into how to implement it as effectively and consistently as possible. Now, with progressive overload, due to the way that the tissues of your lad works when it comes to increasing size, is the day you start, is the day that the tissues start adapting to the stress that is incurred in multiple ways. Now, the first is due to the fascia, a tissue that one of its roles is acting as a protection. The moment that you apply any stress, locally or even systemically, this amazing, functional, and very adaptable tissue kicks into gear to protect the tissue that is under stress or is incurring the damage. For example, if you work out in the gym, you tear the muscles down, the fascia kicks in, holds the muscle belly together so you can't incur any further damage, even if that means limiting movement. So you really can't do any more damage, because if your muscle controlling you to be able to, even fight, flee, or freeze, if that is impeded, then your survival is at stake. So that this tissue is going to do what it needs to do to protect any further damage incurred. Now, the same can be said when you apply any stress to the lad. The tissues tighten. I'm sure many of you that have done PE in the past, you've experienced the turtling effect, which is essentially that tissue, kicking into gear and keeping everything, nice and tight. And technically, in this case, safe. The fascia is known to have the same tensile strength as steel. So if you move too fast or you go too intense too soon, you're essentially working up against steel. So you want to apply enough volume that you're actually manipulating the tissues at all to increase in size and change, but you don't want to do too much that you cause a protective reaction. And that leads me to the second point, which is considering the tissues of the lad in 2 different groups. Now, doing this will always make sure you remember that you're doing this for slightly different reasons. On the one hand, you've got primary tissues such as the tunica, the fascia, and other more rigid tissues that we're trying to manipulate to increase our size. These very primary tissues are the ones that dictate our size. So as you inflate, this is the thing that stops that inflation and is now your functional size. I mean, if we didn't have these tissues, we would essentially turn into just this massive balloon. A lot of guys might be thinking that's great, but you do need to stop at some point so you do have enough rigidity for penetration. So call it a blessing. But essentially, we're trying to manipulate these primary tissues to increase in size. Now, the secondary tissues, the ones that are, in my opinion, just as important, but they're not the primary target. Now, while you will still be stretching the skin, which in my opinion is a secondary tissue, it is also a tissue that needs to keep up in a different way. While the other tissues, the primary tissues, are forever increasing in their tolerance to your stress, because let me tell you, once you trigger the fascia to go into a protective reaction, I'm telling you right now, I've progressed so fast with weight that it almost felt like I was doing nothing. All right, so these tissues, I honestly think are underestimated to the amount that they can tolerate. But what is less tolerant is also the skin. Now, the skin can stretch a lot, but it's tolerant for external stress is much lower, in my opinion, than the primary tissues. So we need to treat these 2 groups of tissues slightly differently. On the one side, we're trying to manipulate or incur enough stress so that we cause change, but not too much that we're essentially working up against steel. And then on the other side, the secondary tissues, just in case you're tempted to go for crazy amounts of volume or even intensity in short bursts, is consider the skin. If you irritate the skin and you don't allow for adequate healing for the next day to have more consistent time under traction or pressure, then this means you're not going to be able to proceed the next day. Imagine a workout where you feel amazing, right? You just annihilate yourself, but you've still got the rest of the week to train another 3 or 4 times. You screw yourself up so much that you can't even walk the next day, let alone lift any weights. So while you may have had an amazing session on that day, now you've screwed the rest of your week. And the same can be said for this journey. If you all of a sudden just, you're feeling just happy on one day and you feel like your tissues can tolerate a lot because they probably can, you might shoot yourself in the foot, so to speak, and impede the rest of your time, decreasing consistency and thus decreasing your results. So I think that's why it's always important just to think of this as in 2 groups, because many guys, I'm sure, they get excited, they get their device for the first time, they feel like their tissues can tolerate a heck of a lot, and trust me, they can, probably way more than you think. I'm talking about the primary tissues. But then what falls behind or incurs a tremendous amount of external stress impeding on any further consistency is the secondary tissues, the skin. So important to always remember the 2 groups, because you're progressing with them in slightly different ways. You want them both to keep up, hitting them with just the right amount of volume. And that leads me to step number 3, which is time first. The more time you have under traction, under pressure, the less chance your tissues have to go back to the former size and former state of a smaller size. So not to mention, while you can still accumulate enough volume, right? So if you're still using progressive overload, you can always increase time without increasing intensity. And not increasing intensity also decreases overall risk. So you're not only going to probably feel less external stress on the skin, such as the secondary tissue, but you're going to stay under that traction and pressure, holding the tissues for longer periods of time, almost forcing the tissues into this newly enlarged state. I've definitely heard of people getting results just with one method, whether it's manual stretching or squeezing, even compressive devices that are used for short bouts at higher intensity. I have heard of people getting results with that. But for me personally, I've definitely approached this in a 2-step fashion, still using progressive overload as the overarching and I guess fundamental rule in my opinion. Step number 1 is actually stretching the tissues, still using those intense methods to manipulate the tissues. However, also using a step 2, which I consider holding. So step number 1, stretch. Step number 2, hold. And that's where other devices come in to be able to hold the tissue for more prolonged periods of time without necessarily needing to take them off all the time, which makes it a heck of a lot more convenient if we use this step as one of the fundamental principles, applying more time. Because if you just try to use a compressive device, you could. I mean, if you're home all day, compressive devices, usually you can only use them for 20-minute sets. And if that's the case and you need to go out in public, it is not the most beneficial tool. So being able to use something like a vacuum stretcher, for example, fitted correctly, properly, and comfortably, you can wear this for hours at a time until obviously you need to go to the toilet or something, that enables you to apply this step number 3, which is more time, literally giving your tissues less chance to go back to their former state. Now, I would always recommend, for not only the decreased risk reason, but also just keeping the tissues in their newly enlarged state, always trying to apply as much time as possible first, obviously whatever suits your certain lifestyle and circumstances. I mean, if you only had a certain amount of time you could apply these methods in the day, that's what you can apply. I mean, if you've got 12 hours to apply, great. If you've got 2 hours and you really couldn't squeeze anything else out, especially if you had a variety of tools to use. I mean, the all-day vacuum stretcher, for example, the vacuum chamber plus a leg band fitted properly and comfortably, you should be able to wear that in public quite discreetly. It's going to take some time and repetition to get used to, but you can stay under that traction and apply this step, which is more time. Now, once you maxed out your time, then I would recommend increasing intensity, and that way you've got this massive window and leeway to apply so much more volume. And on the contrary, if you apply only, let's say, 2 hours to your PE each and every day, or maybe even every other day, hopefully you've got more time than that, that is a much smaller window that you will inevitably have to increase a lot more intensity, unfortunately, and I think most likely going to be the case is you're increasing the risk, or at the very least, you're decreasing your total cyclic window, meaning you will essentially max out whatever devices you're using through intensity because you need to keep that progressive overload train going. Once you've maxed out the time, let's say 2 hours, then you've got a certain amount of safe working force with each device that you're using inside of that window. That is going to max out a lot sooner, meaning you're going to have to take a break. Now, the more you're able to extend that with hopefully more time, the more time you can stay under traction and pressure, and the longer your cycles are going to be. All right, so if you can extend this to 12, even more, maybe 16 weeks, and then take a break to desensitize the tissues again, to make less volume more effective again, then you're going to get more results more consistently. All right, step number 4 is the faster you can heal, the faster you can grow. Now, if you turn your body into just one big healing machine, you're not only going to decrease risk of any irritation, abrasions, minor to major injuries, you're going to speed up your results, inevitably. So how do we do this? Think about everything from a much more holistic perspective. So if you take care of your health and wellness, such as getting better sleep, eating better foods with all your macros and micronutrients that you need, hydrating every single day, working out, being mindful. I mean, what the mind can do in a positive way and a negative way. You could have one thought that changes your emotional state, and that emotional state can change your entire physiology, including causing a systemic stress all the way to affecting the results and the healing capabilities of your lad while you're pursuing this journey. So that's why I want you to approach this from as much of a holistic perspective. I mean, if this goal literally motivates you to do better in life, all right, that is amazing. That is quite honestly, a number of emails we've got in the past. I came into this just looking to increase my size, and I ended up changing my entire life. All right, this is how strange this pursuit can be. I mean, I think much the same happens with the gym. You start doing that, then you start eating better, then you start looking better, so then you want to start improving other areas of your life as well. I think there's a massive domino effect, but honestly, I would highly recommend just considering this and applying as much as possible, using this as motivation, but hopefully you're just doing it anyway. You're trying to improve every area of your life, but creating this big healing machine so you can progress more consistently and hopefully a lot safer too. And the last step is intuition is sometimes better than tracking. Now, while you're trying to apply progressive overload, it is so important to track, because if you don't measure, you can't improve. However, at the same time, even though that's a contradictory point to intuition is sometimes better than tracking, I want to say it's not the only thing. Don't only track, because there are so many different variables in this journey. You might have a poor sleep. You might have, an argument that sets off a cascade of emotional effects that then affects your physiology. Like, so many variables that can happen. And that alone needs to be considered and, can't really be tracked, right? So if you're due to do X amount of volume the following day, but you start doing certain methods that following day, something just doesn't feel right. You sink into the body, the tissues, and you might think, I probably shouldn't do as much today. Maybe my tissues just need a break. Maybe I just need to take today off. Who knows? Maybe you need a break mentally, emotionally, or physically, on a systemic level, or even locally. If you're able to sink in to your intuition, listen to your lad, listen to your body, this may be a better version of your tracking. Now, definitely keep tracking, but use tracking alongside your intuition. If you use tracking as more or less just a suggestive boundary, so to speak, then your intuition can do the rest. All right, so if you're within this boundary and then one day you're probably thinking, maybe I should do a little bit less. Maybe the tracking is correct. I'm actually feeling this volume today. I'm feeling maybe this device in a different way, or maybe some days, hopefully not all the time, this is going to take a lot more time and it's a lot easier said than done, trust me, is maybe you are feeling a little more volume and you think it's not going to impede on the secondary tissues and cause more irritation, impeding on your consistency to do this long term. You always want to think about that. That's why it was step number 2. Always consider the 2 groups of tissues. So yes, you are manipulating the tissues to grow in size, that dictate your size, but you're also needing to keep in mind the secondary tissues that if you burn, if you cause too much stress, that's going to screw everything as well. Now, intuition, in my opinion, obviously comes from knowledge, wisdom, experience, and just a general sense and a feeling. this again is easier said than done, and it's going to take time. You're going to need to learn, what sensations equate to something going on with the lad, whether it is a minor injury coming up, whether it is a blister forming. Sometimes you just need to go through the experience. However, slowly but surely, you will definitely start to build up a lot more natural and organic intuition and know exactly what to do when that time arrives. So while tracking is the boundaries, always make sure that, you have an accompanying intuition alongside it. Now, I hope this video helped, guys. For more content just like this, including an entire video course, everything from uncensored tutorials using devices all the way through to manual methods such as stretching, squeezing, plus foundational videos that's going to help your journey, and an entire PE video course. That's right, Enlarging Your D, an entire video course dedicated to speeding up your results and keeping you safe. Even if you were to just consume 30 minutes a day, not even sped up, you'd be able to get 15 plus years of my experience condensed down into this video course. Plus, for all of our products, from courses all the way through to enlargement products with money back guarantees, check out totalmanshop.com. As always, guys, be the man you know you can be. I'll see you in the next video.